Okay, welcome our dear listeners to the Chairman Chat. I am Patricia, and as you all know from our previous episodes, my lovely team and I aim to create a dialogue between experts on different political leaders, taking a spicy comparative approach to discussing their rise to power. Even more than that, we are tracing trends in ideology and policymaking. Fun! Today we have something exciting, albeit controversial, to discuss. We'll be guided through the Chinese Communist Chronicles as told by Mao Zedong, the founder of the People's Republic of China, and by its current president, Xi Jinping. How much of these men's ideologies overlap, and what is the significance of seeing to what extent Xi is a Maoist in terms of understanding China and its trajectory, or in other words, how much Mao is in Xi? As always, don't forget to check out the additional information we provide, CVs, and so on. And now, before we dive into the nitty-gritty, let's get a quick overview from our resident historian, Karl. After centuries upon centuries of dynasty after dynasty, the Empire of China collapsed in 1911, and one of the new sort took the lead, one of chaos and death, civil war and international aggression, famine, massacres, rebellion. Okay, hold your horses, Karl. A brooding place of ideology, the Communist Party of China, also referred to as the CCP, was founded in 1921, believing in its ability to pull China back up by the bootstraps, get it to work again, and make it great again. During the Long March of 1934 to 1936, so approximately 15 years after the party's birth, Mao had risen to primacy within the party. Mao proved himself to be a capable leader and had growing sympathies from the people throughout rural China. When the CCP won the Second Civil War, the People's Republic of China, shortly the PRC, was announced in 1949, with CCP as its manager and with Mao at its head. Mao died in 1976 after having his ideology of Mao Zedong mainstream and his policies felt nationwide. Examples of influential policymaking periods are the first five-year plan of 1953, the 100 Flowers campaign of 1956 to 1957, the Great Leap Forward from 1958 to 1962, and most well-known, the Cultural Revolution of 1966 to 1976, of which you can all read more in the text surrounding the podcast. Okay, Karl, let me interrupt. How does this connect to Xi? Well, Mao was not the only great man in the Communist Party. Xi Zhongxun, the father of Xi Jinping, the current General Secretary of the CCP and President of China, was also one of the CCP founding members. At the beginning of the PRC, Papa Xi played a significant role in leadership in Beijing, and for a decade and a half this remained so, until in 1962 he was accused of forming and leading an anti-party clique. More info in the CV, and Xi was purged from all leadership positions. Little Xi witnessed the defacement, but also the eventual return of his father to the CCP after Mao's death. Papa Xi's main takeaway was that the dictatorship witnessed by China led to catastrophe and should not happen again. The role of law and politics should be to ensure the protection of a moderate amount of democratic rule. It is safe to say that little Xi's experiences as a child within the party played a big role in his idea of leadership, but perhaps not exactly in the way his papa had envisioned it. Xi's own trajectory of power was similarly subtle as that of Mao. Taking posts in smaller scale rural communities, Xi worked up a reputation of humility and skills in local governance and party administration. He rose up through the ranks, never too greedy, ever so stealthy. With a focus on anti-corruption policy implementation and effective governance strategies, he became very, very popular. However, slowly through his anti-corruption campaign as president, Xi targeted high-ranking and grassroots officials as a result, strengthening party discipline, eliminating political rivals, and enhancing his own authority. Loyalists and supporters filled the vacant positions within the government. In 2018, not so little Xi anymore abolished term limits to the presidency, sparking concern about one-man rule and extreme centralizing of power. Papa Xi most likely would not have been as happy about this, Mao perhaps more so. If you think anything was left out or want to contest some points, our dear audience, let us know in the discussion forum below. Now, back to you, Patricia, on what C means with his ideological conformity and promotion of his version of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Wow. Yes, thank you, Karl, for that not so brief, but I guess necessary background information. I would like to welcome our Mao and Xi Jinping experts to the podcast, Eliza and Danillo. They will be joining us from abroad. And so if we have our best tech pros, we have our best tech pro bros working on making this sound as clear as possible. But they, like everyone else, are also not perfect. So there might be some technical difficulties. At any rate, hello, Danila. Hello, Eliza. How do you do?
Hey Patricia, thank you for having us. I'm curled up with my notes and a tea, so I'm ready to go.
Yes, hello Patricia, hello Eliza, very nice to be here.
Hello, hello. All righty, let's get it started. So I will hand the conversation over to you. How do Mao's theory and policy align with that of Xi?
Well, I think we should start off by acknowledging that although the men hold up very similar positions within the CCP and China, they are working within a very different socio-political and economic context. Nonetheless, I believe we can attempt to move away from the particularities of those contexts and instead focus on certain underpinnings that tie these two together. For instance, the fact that China is economically way better off in the 21st century than it was in the middle of the last. Also, China's position on the global stage is significantly more secure. China has risen and continuing to rise towards extreme global significance.
Yes, but we can also not tie them together. I think it would be too simplistic and quite frankly silly to believe that we can disentangle the person from the context. But sure, there are some overarching factors such as CCP centralization, as well as personal power accumulation, national security and unity policies, and their conception of national development, and the meaning of the people's welfare that definitely link the two together.
Wow, that's a lot, but thank you, Danilo, also for providing some more concrete categorizations for us to have a structured conversation. So let's go through these three things I think that you mentioned: the CCP and hierarchical power centralization, national security and unity as the second one, and perhaps like some conceptions of national development and people's welfare if we have time. But I want to focus on primarily on Mao and Xi and their rise to power. So Eliza, do you want to start us off with CCP centralization?
I would love to. I think it would be helpful to look at Xi Jinping's 14 points as well as Mao's 6 aspects, or in Mandarin it is his 6个方面. These 6 points of Mao are not as widely referenced in the English-speaking world, but are widely used within the CCP and China as summarizing the context of Mao Zedong thought, aiming to reconcile Mao's thought with the core of tenets of Marxism. Trish, can you make sure there's some more info on this written?
Yeah, I'll make sure of that. Yeah.
In Xi Jinping's 14 principles, we see several points that tie the CCP centralization. Xi's first principle is blatantly open about this. It reads, ensuring Communist Party of China leadership over all forms of work in China, and is also reiterated in Principle 11. The Communist Party of China should have absolute leadership over China. This is, I believe, strategically quite vague. On the one hand, it is reminiscent of socialist or communist principle of dictatorship of the proletariat, but on the other hand, it slightly upturns it. The CCP is not necessarily the proletariat, but it rules the proletariat. Applied, this means asserting dominance and control over various spheres of influence, such as politics, economy, media, education, and even the military.
Yeah, so just quickly for the listeners, the dictatorship of the proletariat was deemed a necessary phase of evolving a nation from capitalism to successful socialism, in which the formerly exploited got to rule in some sense. But what I guess we're seeing here is that this transitory phase is very long, ultimately. Yeah. Danilo?
Yes, and it is interesting because it is unclear, even in Mao's own writing, whether they think the party is something of its own entity or rather in tandem with the working class, or perhaps more apt in the case of Mao, the peasant class. This allows for flexibility, right? Like the CCP is able to make up the terms for who and who doesn't align with the ideology of China or the CCP or the party head. Both Mao and Xi also claim that there should be a rigorous practice of socialist core values, which includes Marxism-Leninism, but with Chinese characteristics. And we could go into depth about what that means, but I don't believe we have the time now.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps it is a long shot, but how do you think, for instance, Chinese characteristics, adding that to Marxism and Leninism, or socialism, affect national security?
So for both Mao and Xi, it's not just about adopting a one-size-fits-all socialist model, but customizing it to address the unique circumstances of China. This allows for a lot of policy to be put through that might appear contradictory, which influences the strategies employed to maintain national security and unity, reflecting a pragmatic and contextually aware approach.
They are practical, or at least claim to be, and have always vouched for a certain looseness of interpreting socialism, but not looseness on the interpretation of power. If other members of the CCP stray away from either man's conception of the way socialism should be applied in China, the critic's role in government is endangered. This is a certain party and ideological discipline that both expect from their subordinates, if I can use that word.
Okay, so I think I'm getting a bit better of an understanding, but dear audience, I can imagine this feels like you've done certain brain gymnastics or whatever. You are not alone. If this is the way you feel, please drop a confused emoji in the comments. But yeah, and the way you two, Eliza and Danilo, are speaking about it seems quite critical, right? Highlighting certain authoritarian tendencies. But what about these men was and perhaps is still successful?
Interesting question. I think we can find their successes in national security. As was briefly mentioned in the historical introduction, China pre-revolution had witnessed a lot of aggression, Japan primarily. And so the goal of Mao at least was to, in some sense, achieve a higher degree of sovereignty.
Which succeeded, right? But I think it is more important here to highlight that internally Mao's authority did little to help turbulence within. One of the greatest man-made famines was a direct result of Mao's policy. And the Cultural Revolution was 10 years of severe rates of death. So, although yes, we can argue that Mao was successful in his aim to construct the revolutionary army and military strategy, which is the third point of his 6 aspects, 6个方面, the merit of its outcomes is incredibly questionable. And this is where Xi perhaps has a better reputation going for him.
Yeah, so I bet there's a lot more to say on the ideological tactics taken up by Mao and Xi that bear similarities. However, how can we see these similar strategies for centralizing the power to the individual take place? I mean, I know there are certain structures in place within the CCP that would deter a similar power grab from happening, the one that Mao had. So how did Xi get to a point where he's practically as powerful as Mao was?
Yes, Thanks for bringing us there. I think in many ways it can be distracting at times to look at the abstract theories of men in power and to try to justify the extent of their authority in muddled terms. Danilo, I think you might be more apt at describing how power within the CCP works, especially after Mao.
Yes. I mean, for Mao, being the official leader of the party, he got to define in many ways the political makeup of the party. He took up many of the leading roles and assigned a lot of his buddies to important posts, like Xi's father, who later lost this. After this, there were several structures in place to avoid the same thing from happening. The CCP, though its members entail 7 or 8% of China's inhabitants, is most importantly made up of the Central Committee, which is made up of 240 people. This group is influential in policy decisions, yada yada. Within this group, there's another subsection, the Politburo. And these people are the most powerful members of the party and comprises of 24 members. This group is much like what is seen in other communist countries. China, however, has another subsection, and it's the Politburo Standing Committee, 7 members who ultimately have the final say. And this is headed by the General Secretary, which is Xi, who then holds supreme control over the entire committee. So the General Secretary normally gets to hold up a post for 2 terms, right? Xi has banned that. So in 2007, Xi became head of other commissions such as the Central Military Commission, the National People's Congress, the State Council, and the CPPCC. Trish, I think it could be helpful to visualize this as well for our viewers. So it's complicated, but I think what seeps through is that Xi is centralizing power in the same manner that Mao had, and he's taking up important positions across the board.
Like for Mao, I guess we see that these power grabs rest upon a certain conviction that the party must be rallied around one leader, one man, to ensure survival. Although it's dictatorial, there is little evidence to suggest that it is false. The CCP celebrated its 100th birthday 2 years ago, and China's GDP rates are exponentially growing.
Yes, so is it successful or harmful? I think these are some questions that we can discuss. And so there you have it, dear listeners, a fascinating journey through the Chinese Communist Chronicles, comparing the ideologies and power trajectories of Mao Zedong and Xi Jinping. Eliza and Danilo, I want to thank you so much for unraveling the complexities for us, also bringing up more complexities. Maybe people are feeling a little bit less clear about what's going on. So isn't it intriguing, guys, how history echoes through the corridors of power? From Mao's era of chaos and revolution to Xi's calculated moves, we've witnessed an evolution in the exercise of authority within the CCP. The comparison might reveal some striking similarities, but as we've learned today, the context matters, and each leader brings their own twists to the narrative. As we wrap up this chairman chat, it's clear that the CCP centralization of power remains a constant theme of importance. Mao's turbulent journey and Xi's strategic climb share parallels, reminding us that the dynamics of leadership often repeat, albeit with different faces. So, dear audience, as we delve into the intricate tapestry of Chinese politics, keep those questions and thoughts coming in the discussion forum. Until next time on the Chairman Chat, stay curious and engaged, dear listeners.